Okay, thank you. Now we'll move on to item number 3, public comments for items not on the agenda. It is any member of the public up to 3 minutes for items not on the agenda. We are going to go into closed session, which is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, initiation of litigation pursuant to paragraph 4 of subsection D of section 54956.9, one potential case. If there's any persons who wanted to speak on that and or items not on the agenda, now would be the time, please.
There are no in-person speakers and no hands are raised.
Thank you very much. With that, the City Council will depart this room, go into another room. We will not at this time have any reportable action, and our anticipated time back here is 5:30 p.m. Council will now move into closed session. session. We do have one item, it is a study session, and that will be the San Bruno Fire Department Community Risk Assessment Standards of Cover and Analyst Report Update. Before I go there, I just wanted to make sure that there wasn't anybody from the public from when we first began that had any comments on items that weren't on the agenda. Thank you. So then
No
I
hands
will,
raised.
there's nobody, so then we will, at this point, turn it over to our city manager for an intro, and then we will have some presentations. Please.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor Medina. Javon Grogan, City Manager. I will, in the interest of time, just immediately toss the presentation to our Fire Chief, Ari DeLay. You have a presentation tonight on our standards of cover analysis, as well as you'll receive an update on our efforts to replace Fire Station 52. Without any further delay, Ari DeLay.
Good evening, Honorable Mayor and members of the council. Ari DeLay, your Fire Chief. We're here this evening to present the Community Risk Assessment and Standards of Cover report that was recently completed. I will be joined this evening by Mr. Jim Searing, Project Manager from AP Triton, our consultant. The agenda for this evening's meeting before you is first, I will provide a background on how we came up for the need for a Community Risk Assessment and Standards of Cover study. Next, Mr. Searing will present the Community Risk Assessment itself, and he will also present the highlights and findings from that study. Once Mr. Searing presents the study and the highlights, I will be back to present some initial steps that we'll be taking to address many of the findings and recommendations from the report. And lastly, we'll have an opportunity, obviously, for council to provide for some questions, should you have some. All right. So background, the purpose of this study, the city has been analyzing the replacement of Fire Station 52 for many years, dating back to the PG&E gas pipeline explosion, and most likely a long time prior to that. Station 52 was built in the late 1950s and serves as the city's second fire station, providing coverage for the western half of our city. Station 52 houses on-duty firefighters, fire engines, and other fire equipment that are critical components to the city's public safety. The station is currently in poor condition and lacks many of the modern-day features necessary for all-risk fire service delivery. To ensure that Fire Station 52 replacement takes into account the most up-to-date and comprehensive information available necessary to evaluate the best location and configuration for a potential fire station, it was determined that a standards of cover and community risk assessment was the best tool to provide that assessment and allow us to make the most informed decision. The report is very comprehensive and provides more data than just a fire station replacement, but it was imperative to have the most accurate information on current conditions and future potential development throughout the city of San Bruno. The study itself presents any gaps and outlines capabilities, capacity, and the level of service provided to enable decision makers to effectively prioritize community initiatives through data-driven decisions. Back in 2021, to assist in this analysis, the city released a request for proposal for consulting firms to conduct this community risk assessment and standards of cover study. And we retained AP Triton to conduct the study. The study is now complete, and we're here before you this evening to present the report to the City Council and the community. This report was conducted by AP Triton, as I've discussed earlier, in close consultation with the San Bruno City Fire Department staff. So I think that's an important part. This wasn't just a consultant coming from the outside that never really had any interaction with us at the fire department. The study is really an in-depth review of our fire department's facilities, our equipment, our organizational structure, staffing levels, our operational model, and performance data regarding the fire department. The result of the final analysis is a total of 17 recommendations that we will discuss at the conclusion of the presentation. So what is a standards of cover study and analysis? It's an objective-based study beginning with what we call a community risk assessment that analyzes risks facing the city of San Bruno. And the standards of cover and deployment analysis really measures that service delivery that we provide every day in relation to the risk that's been identified. The study itself follows methodologies as recommended by the Center for Public Safety Excellence and includes analysis and recommendations for future improvements of service to the San Bruno Fire Department. And with that, I will turn the presentation over to Mr. Jim Searing, Project Manager from AP Triton, who's going to be joining us via Zoom tonight to provide a summary of the community risk assessment study itself. He will also come back, talk about the recommendations, and then again, I will be back again before you. Mr. Searing.
Thank you, Chief, and go to the speaker.
All righty, there we go. Thank you, Chief. Can you hear me? Very good. I'm going to share my screen here. All righty. Are we good to go? Can you see the screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council, and thank you, Chief, for that introduction. My name is Jim Searing. I reside in Clackamas County, Oregon. My background, I have 37 years in the fire service. I worked a 30-year career serving with Clackamas Fire District near Portland. We have 22 fire stations. I retired as the Deputy Chief in 2015, and I am now, like yourselves, an elected official. I'm on the board of directors. I've been serving for 7 years. During my career, one of my highlights was being involved in assessing fire departments all across the country who were seeking to be accredited. So I had the opportunity to visit and evaluate many departments over many years. So I worked with Triton Consulting, the company that San Bruno hired to conduct this study. So the Chief mentioned the study is called the Community Risk Analysis Standard of Cover. So we're a neutral, objective third party that came in to do the evaluation. And as the Chief mentioned in his intro, the community risk analysis takes a look at what are San Bruno's community risks. Then based on those risks, the standard of cover then is how are you addressing those risks? What is your staffing, your deployment, your performance? We're a team of 6 who worked on your study. We follow state and national best practices. We refer a lot in the study to an acronym NFPA, that stands for National Fire Protection Association. That's our national agency that gives us guidelines and recommendations in the fire service. We also talk a lot about ISO, that's the Insurance Services Office, the insurance rating industry that I'll talk more about later. And ultimately, this report is to help San Bruno take a look at where you are today and how you can plan for future fire service delivery improvements. So the process involved San Bruno staff, the Chief and his staff that provided a large amount of data in the very beginning that was analyzed. Chief DeLay and Chief Slice headed up a data gathering process. They did an outstanding job. Then based on the analysis, our team identified factors and presented the report to give readers a background of San Bruno Fire, what your specific risks are, your performance and opportunities for improvement. 2 of us conducted a site visit. We inspected your fire stations and your apparatus, and a significant part of the project while on site were the stakeholder interviews. We had the opportunity to meet many of the firefighters, the crews, the chief officers, even many of you, the city council. We had the opportunity to do Zoom interviews. It's great to see some of you again. And other city staff, the city manager, the police chief and directors. We wanted to hear feedback from all of you at San Bruno. It was really an honor to be part of this team, visit your community and meet many of you and your outstanding staff. Your final report ended at 171 pages. So we hope that you and your public will find the report interesting and informative. So in the report, there's a lot of data, a lot of graphs, a lot of maps. And in the presentation today, I just wanted to walk you through the report layout and pull out and give some highlights from each section that I think will help back up the recommendations. So the report is organized into these 6 sections that you see here: the overview of current conditions, the community risk assessment, the standards of cover, the findings and observations, strategies and recommendations, and then the appendix. In the appendix is the section where we inserted the stakeholder interview summary results for the readers to get a good perspective of what you all thought, your ideas and your perspectives. So many find that section of the report very interesting to read. And in the first section of the reports, what we call the overview of current conditions. So in this section, it's an overview of San Bruno, and more specifically about the San Bruno Fire Department. Some specific city data: population and your square mileage, 44,000 residents based on the last census, approximately 5.5 square miles. San Bruno, you are a full service all hazards fire department. You provide fire, EMS, prevention, wildland fire response, and many different types of specialty rescue services. San Bruno also provides ALS, which stands for Advanced Life Support, emergency medical services, where you have paramedics. Providing paramedics is an excellent service and an excellent accomplishment for your city. You have quite a few paramedics. It's important because San Bruno is able to provide a paramedic on almost every apparatus, on almost every call. Not all communities can do that. So it's an exceptional level of service that you're providing to your public. Insurance Services Office, rating number 2. It's a rating that the insurance company provide, or the insurance companies use by that rating service. The lower the number, the better. It's a significant accomplishment to be an ISO rating 2. In California, you have 890 total fire departments. Out of those 890, only 158 are ISO 2. You're in that category, so you're in the top 20% of fire departments in California. Could you ever improve to a 1? Following some of the recommendations, I believe you could. So the answer is yes. ISO bases their rating on items that we also include in the report: staffing, water supply, and community risk reduction. So here you see the San Bruno city map with the boundaries. You have your 2 stations, Station 5-1. It's the City Hall base station on El Camino Real. Station 5-2, it's located in the residential neighborhood off Skyline Boulevard. Here you see the San Bruno population density. So the darker the color per the key, the more dense the population is. Your 3 heaviest population areas are in and around Station 5-1 along San Bruno Avenue, west of the interstate, and then area north of Station 5-2. So based on this map, both stations seem to be located adequately in a general good vicinity based on the population. When we talk about station locations, whether it's current or a possible relocation, there are a lot of factors in good station locations. This population being one. Call volume, we'll see on another map. Median 4-minute travel time, we'll see on another map. The surrounding roads are significant. Speed limits, adequate room on site for expansion of current staff, future staff, and other programs all make up reasons for good, adequate station locations, just to name a few. So the current San Bruno Fire Department structure, you'll see your fire chief reports to the city manager, your battalion chief, fire marshal, executive assistant, 3 shift battalion chiefs. You call them platoons in San Bruno. And then under each battalion chief, you have your 2 engines and a truck. So each day, each 24-hour time period is staffed exactly the same. We note that your fire chief has a span of control of 5, with 3 of those being on-duty battalion chiefs who, in addition to their on-duty BC response duties also have numerous program responsibilities. So with the addition of program responsibilities and the lack of mid-management, the chief really takes on a lot himself or assigns them to the battalion chiefs. And we heard a lot about that during the on-site stakeholder interviews. Here's another picture that you can see it laid out a little differently. You see that you have the fire chief, and in those 3 mid-level chief officer positions, deputy chiefs, division chiefs, administrative battalion chiefs, San Bruno has 0. You just have your battalion chief, fire marshal, Chief Slice, and he's the only other mid-level chief that you have. If you compare yourself to some of your neighbors, both San Mateo Consolidated and Central County, both have a combination of deputy chief, division chiefs, administrative battalion chiefs. So in addition, you added your new training captain position beginning this year that you share with Central County as an outstanding collaborative shared service opportunity that you just started. So here you see San Bruno operational staffing. You have 32 total suppression personnel broken down by rank. And specifically looking at your firefighters, you have 20 firefighters. By adding just one more FTE to make a full-time minimum position, that adds the ability to staff up one of your apparatus to 4. So you do have 2 extra firefighter FTE positions currently that you have on your rolls. You have a lot of paramedics, as I mentioned. That's outstanding. Makes virtually every one of your units ALS. It's better EMS response for your public, and your suppression personnel in San Bruno work 48 hours on and 96 hours off. So San Bruno daily staffing is a minimum of 10 on duty, broken down here. 3 on engine 5-1, 3 on your truck, your battalion chief, and 3 on engine 5-2. The National Fire Protection Association 1710 is a staffing recommendation that we use in these studies and that fire departments use as a benchmark. It recommends that 4-person staffing is the minimum staffing. It's a recommendation based on factors like safety, efficiency, fire ground, task, other factors, but it's just a recommendation. Most fire departments in your region staff their engines with 3. That's very common. So you're right in there with your neighbors. Many in your region and elsewhere also do prioritize staffing efforts for trucks over engines as a step to meet NFPA. Many in your region staff their trucks up for San Mateo Consolidated, Redwood City, North County Fire, or some of those examples of your neighboring communities that choose to staff their trucks with 4 as a priority over their engines with 3. So San Bruno, how does San Bruno overall firefighter staffing compare? This number here, it's a ratio. This is a ratio of the total number of your suppression firefighters based on your population per 1,000. So the regional median, which is the West Coast, is 1. The national median, 1.28. So you'll see that San Bruno total, the number of personnel you have versus your population, you're slightly under. I ran the numbers on a few of your neighbors. San Mateo Consolidated is 1.03. Central is, Central County, your neighbor to your south, is 1.03. San Mateo Consolidated is 0.74. So they're both slightly higher. If San Bruno added just 1 FTE, it goes up 0.03. So if you added 1 firefighter, then you're at 0.75. So you can see it for comparison purposes. So here are photos of your 2 fire stations. Fire Station 5-1, your City Hall-based main station, and Station 5-2. So as I noted, we conducted inspections of both your fire stations, looking for items that general modern day fire stations would have, following best practices that we know it's essential to have adequate facilities to carry out your fire department mission. I noted in red here some of the highlights. Station 5-2, it's a very small square footage station. It's really the size of a large residential home. Only 2 apparatus bays, your current wildland engine has to go out a back door off the back, not really optimal. No area for expansion to grow the crew in the future. And San Bruno self-rated both fire stations in poor condition during our on-site analysis. We concur. In both stations, 63, 64 years old. You don't, it's not every day that you get to see fire stations that old. So you're really beyond the life expectancy of what a fire station would be considered. Some of the items that we noted for Station 5-1, it does not meet seismic upgrade protections, not ADA compliant, no sprinkler system, no security system, doesn't have a separate turnout storage room, which is not optimal in the fire service today because of the diesel exhaust. Exercise room in the apparatus bay, again, not something that is the safest for the firefighters for health reasons, and lacks adequate administrative office space. We heard a lot about these in the stakeholder interviews, and my colleague Greg and I both concur with the rating. Station 5-2, a lot of the same issues, doesn't meet seismic upgrade protections because that station is located near the San Andreas Fault. You would think that it's seismic upgraded, but it's not ADA compliant, no sprinkler system, security, turnout storage room, no exercise room. It's in the apparatus bay. And in that station, the personnel have to walk through the apparatus bay to travel to and from their dormitories and daytime living quarters. Again, it's not something that's optimal for a modern fire station. Here's a general inventory of your apparatus. Most is in excellent condition. With the addition of your 2 new Pierce engines that you purchased in 2022, your apparatus are in very good shape. Your city is to be commended for the condition of your apparatus. You've obviously put your resources into that, and they're very good. The only rating really to note is the condition of the reserve truck 151. It lacks both the equipment on it, and in addition, it has to be stored off-site. You have no ability to store it in one of your current 2 fire stations. Again, not very optimal. So those were the highlights in the report of general conditions, and now we'll talk about highlights in the community risk assessment section, again, which is what are the potential risks in San Bruno fire. So my team members, Frank and Greg, produced this section. There's a lot of maps, a lot of charts, a lot of data, mostly based on census data and other research. And the risks include demographics as per risk populations that NFPA produces, risk classifications, physical hazards, technological, some land use maps, and a lot of maps that show physical assets that San Bruno protects and critical infrastructure. So I thought I would show some samples of the series of maps identifying some of the various risks in your community. This map shows San Bruno's earthquake risk. As you see, the whole area is the highest risk. This map shows your landslide hazards. Again, closer you get to the hills, the higher the risk categories and classes. Same with your wildfire hazards. The closer you get to the hills, the higher the risk classifications are. This map shows San Bruno tall buildings that are 3 stories or higher, mostly located down along El Camino and up into the YouTube area, down in Station 5-1's response area. Large buildings, a map showing any building 100,000 square feet or larger, mostly down around Station 5-1's response area. Institutional childcare facilities spread out throughout the city. Assembly occupancies spread out throughout, but mostly down in 5-1's response area. And multifamily occupancies, a lot down along El Camino Real and around Station 5-1's response area. So those were some of the highlights. There's a lot of maps and a lot more data in the community risk assessment that I hope that you'll find interesting. And next we'll cover the standard of cover section. So we previously saw what San Bruno's risks were, and now the standard of cover is how are you addressing those risks? What's your staffing, your deployment, your performance on calls? This section focuses on how San Bruno performs, then compares that to best practices and national standards. So I want to make sure I point out that the section is not intended as a rating of good or poor for San Bruno, but meant to compare your agency against best practices and look for methods to improve your provision of services. Here you see calls for 4 years. So the total calls 2018 to 2021, you had a total of 16,047 calls analyzed in a 4-year time period. You'll note in 2020, the call volume went down. Why? Because of COVID. But then again, it's increased post-COVID in 2021. You'll note here, the gray is other. Other type calls include calls like false alarms, lockouts, public assist service calls, out of district responses, all those miscellaneous calls, many which are not code 3 calls, lights and siren. And in 2021, you underwent a CAD change at your dispatch center. So with that CAD change, there's a reclassification of a lot more calls, which is why you see that other number jump in 2021. So 2 more ways to look at all of those calls in that 4-year time period. You can see January through December. For whatever reason, there's more calls in the winter time than there is in the summer, but pretty even distribution throughout the year. But during the day, the hourly workload is significantly different. 5 or 6 in the morning, the lowest call volume during an average day, and everyone starts to go to work, traffic speeds up, and then everyone's at work. And then during the work day and the school day is when most of your calls are. And then it peaks again in the evening around 7 to 8 p.m. Everyone's going home. And then throughout the night, it goes back down and you start all over. So an interesting way to look at when and what time of the day are most of your calls. So a big focus of the standard of cover section is the tracking of times per the NFPA standards. So we have 3 main areas that we analyze: alarm handling time, turnout time, and travel time. And then the overall total response time of all 3 of those added together. So the alarm handling time is 3 components to that one time alone: alarm transfer, alarm answering, and alarm processing. Transfer is an extra element for some communities. And it's important to note that in San Bruno, you do have that added extra time element, alarm transfer time. And the reason is because your calls are received at San Bruno Police Department, then transferred to San Mateo County. So this added time is the time that we weren't able to actually document from the study. But we do have San Mateo County dispatch times because their CAD tracks it. So currently you have no CAD to CAD that goes from San Bruno Police to San Bruno Police to San Mateo County. So here is San Mateo County dispatches call processing times. So the time is from the time San Bruno Police Department transfers it to the time the bell rings for the firefighters. So it's called alarm processing time. And you'll see that they're handling their time in slightly under. EMS is actually excellent, and fire is slightly over. So alarm processing times by San Mateo, very good. Turnout time. This time is from the time the bell goes off to the time the firefighters push respond. So there's 2 slightly different times, 1 minute for EMS and 1 minute, 20 seconds for fire. Why more time for fire? NFPA gives an additional time because firefighters have more safety gear, the turnouts and helmets and things to put on during their response to fires. But it's interesting that when you look at this, the EMS is actually higher. And why do you think that is? Probably due to COVID. During the COVID period, the firefighters put on additional gowns and masks and goggles and additional EMS PPE, which obviously added to the time. So that's interesting, but overall, the performance is under the standard by about a minute, which is actually very common. One item to note that during the study, when we identified the turnout time, Chief DeLay actually using a program that he has called Continuum, is able to track and make improvements. And it sounds like there's been a lot of outstanding efforts already done in that area. So that's what the process is all about. Agency is already making improvements, and the community is recognizing that. So outstanding. Turnout time, this shows turnout times by the unit. You'll notice the BCs get out the quickest and the truck takes the longest. Pretty normal. That's what we see everywhere else. Different fire stations are different based on the station configuration. So new stations generally are laid out more efficiently, resulting in quicker times. Time from respond to arrival is the travel time from the time they leave the station until they hit arrive. So the performance generally is about a minute over in both call types. Possible reasons: one is overall traffic. You have a lot of traffic in your community, congestion on your main arterials and freeways, especially since what we saw most of the calls in the evening hours. Another possible reason, station 5.2 backs up a lot of calls when 5.1 is out on a call. We'll see in a upcoming slide that 20% of the time you have 2 calls or more at once. So with station 5.2 currently, when they travel east, backing up 5.1, they go down Sneath Lane from Skyline to El Camino. There's 7 stoplights, 2 stop signs. It's a steep hill, 30-mile-an-hour posted limit, 1 direction each way. That obviously impacts some of their data. Other reasons, no traffic control preemption device that you have. You don't have an overall complete system in San Bruno. We call them opticoms. That significantly impacts travel times as well. And you'll notice on the other call types, most of those other call types are not code 3. So it's really for informational purposes only, insignificant for most travel time. Here's another picture of your response times. When you add the 1-minute turnout time and the 4-minute travel time, then the goal is 5 minutes for EMS, 5 minutes 20 for fire. And you'll notice here, when you look at it from this perspective, is that you're really only about a minute, especially on fires, about a minute over. So it's not that bad, and you're right in there. From your citizens' perspective, we feel the most important time is the call received to first unit. It's the time that someone dials 911 and the dispatcher picks it up until the time you arrive. So all incidents combined, 6 minutes and 30 seconds is the goal. And you'll see fire 6:58, EMS 7:21. Slightly slower than best practices, but not that bad, especially for fire. You're really only about 30 seconds off, not a lot. So there's room for improvement and the easy ability to attain these times with improvement plans. Here you see the San Bruno travel time overlap. So San Bruno, per our GIS computer-based traffic, following normal traffic patterns, shows from station 5.1, the blue area is where they should be able to respond to in 4 minutes. The red area is where should station 5.2 be able to respond to in 4 minutes. In the graph area in the middle here is the overlap. So station 5.2 actually goes down into 5.1's area, vice versa. Good, very good coverage overall. It's interesting to note that you also provide very good 4-minute travel time coverage to your auto aid partners, both north and the south as well. But 4-minute travel time coverage, very good. Also, your ISO 1.5 mile engine distance is also very good. You have excellent coverage. Probably one of the reasons why San Bruno is an ISO 2 rating, because of this is one of the significant areas that ISO looks at. Your coverage even extends in auto aid areas to the north and to the south. And same with the truck. ISO gives truck coverage 2.5 mile distances. And since the majority of your city is covered, then you have good adequate coverage for your city for truck coverage as well. So the concurrence is the most important item to note here. You'll see out of all those 16,000 calls you had in 4 years, 80% of the time, there's 1 call going on at one time. But 20% of the time, there's either 2 or more, most of the time 2 and sometimes 3 or more. The unit hour utilization shows that most of the time, the higher the percentage, the more times that apparatus is on a call when another call comes in. So you'll see it's obviously engine 5.1 most of the time is on a call when one of these other calls comes in. And most of the time it's engine 5.2 that covers those calls, and sometimes truck 5.1 as well. So this shows all 16,047 calls plotted together. It's called the San Bruno All Incident Density Map. It's a very interesting map. Just like the previous population map, this map also shows overall good station location coverage based on calls. Could both stations be located slightly in a modified location for better optimization? I would say yes. Station location coverage is good for 5.1, but could 5.1 be moved further north if there was a better location that suited the city better? Yes. Could station 5.2 be located somewhat further to the south, closer to where the majority of the yellow call area begins to come up San Bruno? Yes. So again, right now, good coverage. Your stations could be relocated slightly in each case, but the overall, very good coverage. Your structure fires, these show where all fires were in a 4-year time period, very evenly spread out throughout the city. Effective response force is defined as the total number of firefighters needed on an initial alarm deployment. You include your officers and chiefs to adequately mitigate a fire. NFPA states the recommended time limit for arrival of that first alarm assignment as 8 minutes. Medium hazard, this is for 8 minutes is for medium hazard responses, which are houses, strip malls, 3-story apartments, those medium type of complexes. The total number of firefighters needed for medium hazards is 28. So the total number of firefighters you need is 28. And the map shows you have 100% coverage in your effective response area. You even have higher than that. Most of your city, you can get between 30 and 40 and even 40 to 50. You don't see that everywhere. Why? It's because you have AVL with your auto aid partners on all sides of you, and you have many of those auto aid partners and stations that are located close to your city. So those were some of the highlights from the standard of cover section. The findings section of the report is where we state what we learned, what we found out, what we noted, broken down by sections and listed as short statements. And based on those findings, we then list a series of recommendations. Again, as I mentioned earlier, not as a rating of San Bruno Fire, but as a suggested list of items for your fire chief, your elected officials, and ultimately your community to consider to help you make decisions and fire service delivery improvements into the future. So the findings and observations report is listed in 5 categories. The first category are findings that are operations and deployment related. So most service demand is in Station 5.1 area, mostly north. We saw that. Significant new development in this area, the Tanforan development and other significant developments, the YouTube complex that's underway, a lot in that response area justifies increased staffing, especially at Station 5.1. Based on the data, both stations in general good locations overall could be slightly relocated if more adequate sites were available. So station locations are based on population. We saw that on the map. Buildings, we saw that on that map. Calls, but they can also be better strategically located to allow growth in the addition of additional staff, more apparatus bays, especially for your reserve truck, if that was a possibility, larger stations to add exercise rooms, possible training grounds, community meeting rooms, better roads, a lot of different reasons, not just population, buildings, and calls. AVL has a lot of challenges. We heard from a lot of your firefighters, they respond a lot out of district. So that's one of, when you have AVL and you drop the borders and share resources, that's just something that happens. You find yourself responding out of district sometimes a significant amount of time. Response performance. San Bruno answers the calls and transfers to San Mateo County. So that does result in additional time. It was a time that we weren't able to track. The turnout time and travel time are both below NFPA standards, as we saw. But with improvements that have been identified by the chief, we think can easily attain benchmarks in those areas. And then overall, 90% of all incidents, you're really only about 1 minute below the standard. So you're very close. Personnel and staffing, the first 4 are all related to the staffing of fire apparatus. You currently maintain a minimum of 3 on your engines and your truck. NFPA 1710 recommends 4, would require 1 additional firefighter then to meet that standard for the truck. And 7, if you were to meet the standard for all 3, additional staffing would improve deficiencies in critical tasking and alarm assignment totals. But as I mentioned before, staffing costs money. There's budget limitations in every community. And in San Bruno, many of your neighboring communities, they staff their engines with 3 as a minimum. It's very common and serves you well. Many communities put together staffing priorities in their plans to prioritize trucks over engines. I mentioned that earlier, such as San Mateo Consolidated, Redwood City, and North County Fire. And San Bruno has no formal succession plan and career development plan in place, and no operational management staff in place to assist the chief and the fire marshal. So stations and facilities, both station 5.1 and 5.2 over 63 years old in poor condition. The numerous deficiencies, as we mentioned, station 5.1 is in a suitable location to remain a city hall based station if you choose so, but could be moved north if there was a better location. Station 5.2 is in a residential neighborhood, sometimes not optimal, but could be moved to a more optimal location, possibly south, for overall better system-wide response coverage and to allow for growth and more efficient provision as some of those areas that we mentioned. Miscellaneous findings and observations. San Bruno has current shared services. You have your training captain that you share with Central. You use AVL. Your on-duty shift mechanic program seems to be working very well for your city. We heard a lot about that during the site visit. You have no current capital facility replacement plan, and many of your SOGs are outdated. And I wanted to mention that there was universal stakeholder input at all levels about the high regard of support, enthusiasm, spirit, and camaraderie. Many levels of your department, they're very supportive of your fire department, very supportive of your fire department and city leadership, and very excited for your future. You all really have a lot to be proud of. So based on those findings, we end the report with our list of recommendations, and there happens to be 17 in the report. Number 1, the fire department should start conducting performance outcome measurements. We list some areas of examples. Performance measurements, start tracking, reporting your performance. The chief is already doing that. His continuum program can assist you with that, and that can be self-managed. 2, consider replacing both station 5.1 and station 5.2 with new facilities. Fire stations, very expensive. Budget is the key. The station replacement is probably, in our opinion, a priority for San Bruno. In our view, both stations are really just as important and need to be replaced for the numerous reasons that we listed for each. 3, consider replacing station 5.2 with the new facility in a more strategic optimal. We thought we would list that separately because right now it's in a residential neighborhood with limited ability to grow that station. Could you sell the property and relocate to a more optimal location? We think so. If you go back and look at both stations in their current locations, and the 4-minute travel time overlap is very good. And from 5.2, it's actually very good in a lot of the area to your north and your adjacent jurisdiction. This map shows the 4-minute travel time distance from station 5.1 and a new proposed station 5.2 location at the corner of San Bruno Avenue, slightly to the south. So as you'll see, when I flip back and forth between these, what happens when you move it further south, just a little bit to San Bruno Avenue, there's more coverage down here and you have less coverage in your neighbors. So more coverage that you're doing, especially quicker response times that you're going to get on those backup calls to 511, more coverage down here and less coverage that you're providing to your neighbor to the north. So proposed location, still very good 4-minute travel time coverage. And in addition, moving station 52 to San Bruno Avenue gets you closer to where this dense area crosses the interstate up San Bruno as well. So just a few different ways to look at the data that covers that proposed location. Based on our site visit, we drove around to see what areas in and around Station 52 could be identified in that red circle that could possibly work as a relocated fire station. And we happened to come on this site. It seemed to be perfect in every aspect for all the reasons we previously mentioned: the ability to expand the facility, better main roads, all the things that you would need in a new facility. It's on the corner of Glenview and San Bruno. And in our opinion, that was possible to acquire that property that would work perfect for you in every aspect. Number 4, consider shared services with outside agencies when efficiencies can be recognized and duplication eliminated. You're already doing this. You're already partnering with Central and the training captain. You're already partnering with all your neighbors with ABL. Whenever overall efficiencies can be gained and better service to your community can be provided, you should always consider that. Number 5, consider building training facilities and infrastructure. Could be at a new Station 52, could be at a new possible Station 51. If 51 was rebuilt at the current City Hall location, could you build a new tower back where the current tower is in that back area? Is possible. We've heard a lot about training tower and the quest for a training center while on site also. Number 6, find a location for Reserve Truck 151 to be stored and equipped within San Bruno. Again, a new Station 51 or Station 52 could accommodate that. It's really important to have your reserve apparatus in a ready, equipped state, and really should be within your own jurisdiction if possible. 7, find more suitable facilities and equipment for the on-duty shift mechanic program. Once again, could be in a new Station 52 or a new 51. The program seems like it's working very well, and in order to continue and be successful, it really needs an adequate facility and equipment to help the efficiency of that program. These 3 recommendations are all staffing related. We recommend hiring enough additional firefighters to staff Truck 51. Consider hiring enough additional firefighters to ensure a minimum of 4 on engine 51 and 52. And consider conducting a management staffing analysis for the potential hiring of additional management staff. So really the priority could be the truck, 1 FTE, as I mentioned earlier, to make the commitment of a full-time minimum of staffing of 4. It's a financial commitment. The staffing of your engines could be a goal, brings your both engines up to what NFPA recommended best practices is, but you're doing well now, and the staffing of your engines in your region is this is really just a recommendation based on best practices. And you saw for number 10, those 0 numbers that your mid-level chief officer positions and with the chief span of control currently maxed and your battalion chief program duties maxed. This addition should really be considered to help your agency into the future. 11, continue to support and update succession planning, career development. This was one of the chief's priorities that he listed. We heard from many in the agency. 12, develop, update standard operating guidelines and policies. Again, one of the chief's priorities, and we heard from many in the agency. It's important to follow best practices with firefighting and EMS profession, that all standard operating guidelines continually be reviewed and updated accordingly. 13, consider developing a strategic plan. Developing this plan will help your agency take these recommendations and your own goals and formulate them into a formal plan that can lead you into the future. Consider writing a firefighter highway safety response standard operating guideline. This is a specific one that we listed because we heard from many of your firefighters during the interviews that this was one area that they specifically thought was important to them and is a risk. 15, consider further analysis of the call answering times, processing times, and specifically call transfer times from the San Bruno Police Department. This is important for you to work with both your partners. You have 2 dispatch partners, San Bruno Police and San Mateo County Dispatch Center. You need to find out how can your overall dispatch process and transfer times be more efficient? How can they be quicker, which overall will result in better service for your public. So it's very important to look at this. CAD to CAD is one option. It sounds like it's been considered in the past, but never got there, and is probably something that would be good for you to consider in the future. Continue to study turnout time performance, travel time measures, possible causes. The chief seems like he's on top of this, already has a plan on addressing this recommendation, and find suitable locations for workout exercise areas outside of the apparatus bays at both the stations. Again, going back to a new station 5.1 and 5.2, one or the other or both would address this problem, getting the exercise areas out of apparatus bays for health and safety reasons really is very important. Perhaps put a committee together, address what your options are at this time until you get your new stations, because those new facilities are probably a ways out. So that's the summary of our report for San Bruno. Again, it was an honor to work on your project. We're excited to provide you our feedback as you go forward as a city and as a fire department. You should be proud. You have an excellent fire department at all levels, led by a new forward-thinking chief who seems to have great support and great staff working under him. So at this time, I'll turn it back over to Chief DeLay, followed by any questions you may have. So thank you very much.
Thank you for the report and comments, and we'll turn it back to Chief DeLay.
Great, thank you. And if I can get my presentation up on the screen. So I'd like to talk, while we get the slides changed, in regards to some initial steps. Obviously, there's a lot there in the report. It's very comprehensive. But in response to the 17 recommendations, we've identified a series of corrective actions that we are implementing over the past weeks and obviously into the future to improve our performance today that addresses many of the issues and recommendations in the future. The first step is to be able to analyze our data. In the past, we really didn't have the ability to analyze our data related to call volume here locally in San Bruno. And if I can get that slide up for me, please, that'd be great. We've leveraged the same software program that we use for our records management system, or the system of record that we put our reports in on a daily basis. They have an add-on called Continuum that we use to analyze the data on a day-to-day basis now. And we can really dig really deeply into that data very quickly. This allows us to be able to understand the performance of our department relative to the standards of cover and service response goals. And simply put, it's really a report card that comes out on a daily basis. And it offers more value in near real time for us to be able to proactively and continuously improve performance for the department. The first item I'd like to address briefly is our turnout times. Obviously, the report highlights that it's below the optimal standard. The turnout time, as we discussed, starts from the beginning of the time the bell goes off till the time we push en route to the call. And really the reason for some of these suboptimal responses, really the 2 years plus of that data was during COVID. Our firefighters donned coveralls and personal protective equipment that required additional time to respond. But there's other items that we wanted to address as well. Our facilities and the layout of our facilities really is not optimal, and we hope to improve that obviously in the future. And I would say that the other last one is the needs for some additional training. We really want to make sure we just, now that we have some tools to analyze the data and see where we're at, we can take that information, relay it to our crews so they have an understanding of the importance, the impact of that turnout time as described. I'll move on to some of the technology things that we've implemented. To provide our firefighters with real-time alerts and easy to update mission-critical information, Every one of our firefighters is outfitted with an app that we use on their smartphones that they carry in their pocket. Mostly people carrying smartphones all the time with them nowadays. And it uses the same iOS-based platform that we use in a fire apparatus to leverage Apple push notifications technology to alert our crews instantly the second a call is dispatched. The next piece of technology we're using to assist us in improving our turnout times is what we call a digital dashboard. We've installed these digital dashboards in the fire station, and we're working with a vendor to be able to install the software that's required. And what it does is these digital dashboards give our firefighters the nature of the call, the units dispatched, and the response routes right on the screen as they're passing by in the hallway. And they also start what they call a turnout clock. If you look on the left-hand side of the screen, there's a picture with a little small clock, and it starts that clock the second that the call is initiated. So they really are more acutely aware of the time that's elapsed since the bell went off till they've made it to the apparatus. And some of the additional benefits of these digital dashboards is their integration with that same program that I talked about called Continuum, where we can kind of track their measurements on a day-to-day basis and be able to show that to the crews so they can be really acutely aware and make quick and swift course corrections related to response times on a day-to-day basis. And we've already made significant improvements in our turnout times, and I'm looking forward to some of that additional information with the city manager's office as we move forward. The next piece is our travel times. Obviously, the travel times, as we've alluded, are slightly below what we'd look for in relation to the standard. To address the travel times, we have the two new engines that we discussed, and for those that attended our push-in ceremony with the apparatus, you notice that we had this new system called Hoss Alert. This system alerts drivers to emergency vehicles that are approaching and responding to emergencies. And the additional benefit, it allows us to have collision avoidance prevention. And you'll see on the screen, there's a small, I don't know if you can visualize it from here, but it's a report card that comes out on a monthly basis to us, and it shows how many cars that we've alerted to our presence. And for the month of October, we've alerted over 2,000 drivers of our presence coming up behind them and asked them to pull over on apps on their phone with Google Maps, Apple Maps, Waze, and other technologies that are in some of the modern cars. Also, when our responders activate the apparatus emergency lights, the approaching drivers receive that real-time alert and are asked to pull over, and it's really an important piece for collision avoidance for us as well. We're also in the process of outfitting Truck 51 and Battalion 16 with the same technology. And the little video on the right will show you the collision avoidance. There's a small video, and that's what the driver will see when an approaching apparatus is coming from an opposite direction with their code 3 lights on to make sure we try to avoid a potential collision with another emergency vehicle. It was alluded to in the study, but traffic preemption, or Opticom, is an important thing for us in the fire service as well as our police department. All of our apparatus are equipped with Opticom, or traffic preemption devices, that help us clear intersections when our apparatus are responding to emergencies. In our analysis, we found that the portion of the system on the vehicles is fully functional. However, the portion of the system that's on our streetlights throughout the city of San Bruno is in various states of disrepair. We're working with San Bruno PD and our Public Works Department to evaluate the current condition of the system, which has fallen into disrepair and has a significant impact on our travel time, especially along the El Camino corridor. This is a mission-critical system, obviously, that needs to be repaired to provide for a timely response for the San Bruno Fire Department and our San Bruno Police Department. Next piece briefly I provide for you is highway safety training. That was an item that was identified in a concern of our firefighters, as well as mine as the fire chief. Then highway safety training has been placed as a priority for the training division to implement and deliver to our crews in the coming months. We talked about standard operating procedures and policies. We are working to develop a contract with Lexipol for policy development, and those items collectively kind of are the really low-hanging fruit that I think that we're really, keen to address in really swift timeline, and we will be happy to report the findings back to the city manager's office on our progress on those things that I've just discussed. So circling back to, the real reason the study was originally conducted and kind of why we got started on this is Fire Station 52. The original station, as you see in the picture here, was the reason the study was initiated. The condition of our current Fire Station 52 is really poor, and it's a priority, at least for the fire department, to make sure we try to identify ways we can improve our station itself. The report has identified a suitable zone and an ideal location potentially for a replacement if it were to be approved. But Caltrans still owns the property there at the intersection of San Bruno Avenue and Glenview. The parcel has a pretty interesting history and past of ownership. It's been bought and sold by Caltrans a couple of times over the years. And most recently, the parcel has been removed from their excess property list and at the request of their maintenance division for a potential use as a training area for Caltrans to teach people how to drive. But fire department's purpose is the site really optimizes response for us in the fire department. And if you think about the words from Mr. Searing from AP Triton, if we moved 51 north and 52 south, you really kind of identifies that San Bruno Avenue is really kind of the main artery within the community that allows us swift travel up and down throughout our community. And the first step we would need to do is conduct an earthquake study. However, we've been denied an encroachment permit by Caltrans. However, we're submitting an appeal to that in the coming days. We have made initial contact with our local and regional elected officials to kind of stress the importance of the fire station itself and the location of it for our purposes and kind of help get some guidance from them on kind of next steps. And our plan would be to pursue the Caltrans lot as the #1 priority for looking for a fire station for Station 52 for a replacement should the decision to replace the fire station come about. This decision is really important to us in the fire department because the Station 52's location, if it's replaced, would obviously last generations to come. So its specific location is very important to us for the plan for the future. And lastly, I would see on the slide before you are some of the more long-term items, including fire station replacement. I'd like to conclude with the fact that saying that we have an amazing team at the San Bruno Fire Department with really amazing dedicated employees who love San Bruno and they love the San Bruno Fire Department. And I see them as our #1 asset. And my job as fire chief is to work to provide them with the best conditions to be able to provide the best service for our community. With that, here to take any questions from you.
Thank you very much to, again, everybody for their presentation, their information. I'd like to see, with keeping our time in mind, if there are any questions from colleagues, and I would like to first call upon Councilmember Hamilton.
Thank you very much for the presentations. I had just a couple of questions. One, regarding the recommendation for 4 firefighters per unit apparatus. It was mentioned it's very common for jurisdictions to staff just 3, and the ideal is 4. But for those that do staff 4, does that occur more on engines or more on trucks?
Yeah, I think there's the NFPA standard, which Mr. Searing alluded to, and our region, 3-0 staffing on fire engines is pretty much the norm. However, the staffing recommendation and the standard and their recommendation as well is 4 on the ladder truck. It provides us some operational efficiencies when we respond to structure fires and allows us to be able to effectively do the job that firefighters do on structural fires more effectively. We don't really have a problem with assembling a lot of firefighters over time, as you could see by the study and what was involved, but those first initial units and that 2.5-mile travel time for the truck and the jobs that they complete in that time is the really important one. So I concur with that same recommendation that Mr. Searing came up with, that I think we're really in good shape when it comes to engine staffing, but the truck would be, if obviously funding allowed, would be ideal to increase.
Got it. Thank you. And then my other question, I just wanted to confirm regarding the Opticom issues. I want to confirm that the FD will work together with the police department to work up a project for addressing those issues with their estimated costs and bring those back to council at a future date. Is that the intention?
Correct. Councilmember Hamilton, thank you. We are actively working with PD and Public Works to address this issue. It's a super important issue for us that we've identified in the last days, really. And we're working pretty feverishly to get as much of it repaired as possible in as timely as manner as possible. And then to come before the city manager and the council, obviously at some point, to be able to let you know what the fiscal impact of any repairs necessary would be.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember. Vice Mayor Mason.
Yeah, thank you so much for all the work done around this. And Chief DeLay, I think our first conversation was around this particular fire station. So I'm glad we've gotten to this point. I just wanted to ask if there's been any potential costs already compiled that will be shared at some point.
Yeah, just in general terms, the cost of construction, you know, we know with the rack and everything is pretty high. And it just really depends on the design and layout. You know, I would say I would look to Matt Lee, our Public Works Director, who's had, you know, could have some initial cost estimates for a fire station. But, you know, it's obviously in the millions, you know, nowadays for a modern full-service fire station.
Okay, great. And I think you made a comment that this is a priority, at least for the fire department. I think it's beyond the fire department. And I'm not sure if you're aware, but we did have some consultants pull for a bond measure. And this was definitely part of the council's plan to eventually get funded, whether it be through a bond measure or another form. But it pulled that we wouldn't have enough support in this election cycle. So I am in full support of what you're attempting to do here. And I want to just thank our entire fire department. We have been paying attention, and you've been hiring a lot of locals. And I was in a conversation the other day with the spouse of one of your staff members, and I asked how it was going. And the response was that it's hard to be a firefighter because now you're seeing and having to help the parents of the kids you grew up with. So it is a job that I greatly respect, and thank you. And I look forward to what the future brings.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Mason.
Councilmember Medina.
Yes, I want to also thank everyone for their work on this project. As we go forward and we enter into our budget, at some point, will we have a study session or an update on the recommendations and how far along we've gone in addressing those? Those would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let's see if there's any members of the public that wish to comment on this item.
I do not have any speaker cards and no hands are raised.
Thank you very much. For me, concluding this, I do want to acknowledge that, you know, we have a requirement of a 6-minute, 59-second from dispatch to site. That also helps AMR, and that's why we're staffed with who we have on the truck and engines, so that that time stops once our apparatus arrive, which takes time for AMR that will come subsequent to that. For somebody who deals with the AMR contract on the JPA, I think even they find themselves in the staffing situation and component and challenges, but I still think we're meeting the obligations and the needs of the county. We had a little hiccup, shall we say, earlier, and I think we've gotten over that hump. I also want to acknowledge that in our county, for the trucks, there are a handful of the agencies that do have a 4th personnel member. Us and Central do not. And I think that when we start to look at it, and of course everything's economics, that might be the first step. Obviously, I don't think anybody's walking away from here saying everything on the engines would be upped, because that's not how it really is working primarily through the county. Everything does take time and the priorities that are necessary. I also want to, it was pointed out, you know, as far as the timing, that we want to improve upon that. And that, again, as you've already alluded to, is being worked on for the lights, that they go automatically down, that I know we contract out with South San Francisco, and there needs to be more work to that. But I think that's essential. And if we have it in budget times, when we have those main arteries, and I also know that the El Camino Real, you have to talk to Caltrans. So as we know, that sometimes, I'll speak for myself, is a little more daunting and bureaucratic than it should be, but I think this is an item and an area that if this council needs to support, needs to step up, needs to reach out, I'm one that will do that. So I want to also thank the fire personnel for what they do, what they've done, and what they continue to do on a daily basis. And I do know that, and it seems obvious based on the recommendations, as well as what has been stated, that already work is in progress and well on its way, and the technology has entered into the station and the department so that we can better serve, even though I think that we have served and continue to serve our community and our residents very well. But we will be improving upon it, and there's nothing wrong with that. So with that, with nothing else, I want to thank everybody for their time and their comments, and appreciate the report. So thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And with that, we will go ahead and conclude this study session and adjourn to the next regular city council meeting, which will be held on November the 8th, 2022 at 7 p.m. We'll be back at 7.